About 12 years ago, I was about 19 years old. I found myself working at a strip club. I was a cocktail waitress and a door girl. Now, I'm not going to get into the details about how a 19-year-old ended up there, but I was there. A year goes by, about a year, and Mr. Prince Charming comes in. Apparently, he's already piqued me a little bit, and he had all the right words to say, and you know how the story goes. There was a lot of chemistry. It was good. It was good when it started. But there was a point in time where it wasn't so good. But in the midst of all that, one night we ended up going to a restaurant. Me, him, and his 2-year-old son at the time. After we got done eating, he went outside and smoked a cigarette. And this is in South Florida, so it was kind of indoor, outdoor, like a garage door open, and he was right out there. But in the midst of all that, his son was playing with a toy, and all of a sudden, the toy ended up going to the other side of the table. And I was sitting in the middle of the table, his son was sitting on the left end of the table, because my boyfriend at the time was sitting across from me in the middle of the table as well. And so he went to go climb on the table as kids do. And I went to go stand up. I didn't even move my feet. And I grabbed him with my left arm, grabbed the toy with my right arm, sat him down, handed him the toy. Like I said, I didn't move my feet. And before you know it, I went to go sit down, and I ended up on the floor. Lo and behold, it was a metal chair. The welding, bad weld, shouldn't have been on the floor. The arm of the leg gave out. The top of the chair went up my back, and my head slammed to a table. And so everybody around me jumps up. And once I come back to, I'm like, holy cow, Because it all happened so quick. I mean, so quick. And everybody in the restaurant jumped up, it seemed like, because, the noise was just so loud, the thump, And so, before you know it, he comes back over, and he's like, let's go, you know what I mean? After he's telling the manager, they're having words back and forth, because the manager wasn't really necessarily being compassionate or understanding, or he was basically making us pay the bill. He couldn't even be like, you know what I mean? And so, after this is all said and done, we get back in the car, and he tells me, we're going to the hospital. We're going to sue the F out of them. And I'm like, Mrs. Tough Girl. Played softball my whole life, growing up. And no. I'm okay. He insists, no, we're going to the hospital. F these mother effers, and because he's hot and heavy, and he's also a character. That's all I'm going to say. I met him at the club, a gentleman's club. And so we get to the hospital, and before you know it, muscle spasms, contusions, herniated disc, you know what I mean, concussion, whatever. And so a lawsuit started. And before you know it, going to the doctors, getting cortisone shots, doing therapy, and at therapy, getting massages, blase. In the midst of this, me and him did end it. And by this time, I'm like, I think once everything was all said and done, I'm about 22 years old. 21, 20, 22. And I just want to say this, that he was 10 years older than me. 9.5, whatever. But I forgot to mention, when I was 14 years old, my best friend, she moved up to the mountains. And so I ended up visiting. You know, it was heartbreaking for me that she left, and it wasn't. It was heartbreaking for their family, a lot of stuff going on, blase, blase. But I ended up always, coming up and visiting and whatnot. But while I was with him, I would I would envision, like living in the mountains. I would envision like getting up here. And this is important because this goes in with the story. And it's funny because his family actually had land up here, and in the midst of all of this as well, we ended up having 6 pit bulls together. That's important as well. But I used to sit there and envision the mountains. I mean, when I would come visit my best friend, I didn't want to go back. Like, I didn't want to go back to Florida. And so here I am in this lawsuit. Me and him break up, going through all of this pain. And I mean, it was pretty rough pain. I mean, I would cry myself to sleep. I ended up working at a restaurant. And if anybody knows anything about waitering, it's rough, especially when my dominant side was the side that was affected by this accident. And so I got out of the restaurant and I ended up working with dogs, and that's why this is important as well. I worked doggy daycare, and then I went to the rescue, and then I worked in the hospital part of it, and I got multiple different aspects of my passion for a couple years as this lawsuit was continuing. But when it came to this lawsuit, I had a surgery years prior on my right side that they were trying to say, goes hand in hand, and it's not all about the accident, and blase, 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 and, just making it difficult and trying to put the blame on somebody else besides taking responsibility and accountability for what happened, even though I didn't have the pain and anything to what I was dealing with at the time prior to the accident because of the surgery I had years ago. I mean, it was hard for me to drive a stick shift. I had a stick shift, and once I got it into like 4th gear, I pulled my right leg back and I'd put my left on the gas. I mean, it was rough. I had icy hot patches on the back, taking Vicodin. And what really helped me was I met a woman when I went to go get a massage, like independently on my own. And I met a woman, and she was an elder from a whole different country. And after she touched my body, it was like a miracle. She had hands, you can tell that God, the Most High, was working through, because that was like the first time I had some serious relief. And I went back to her like one more time, and then I couldn't find her again. But back to working at the with the animals. Before you know it, I'm trying to get this lawsuit ended years later, because in the midst of all of this, wanting to go to the mountains, that bird was chirping in my ear that when you get this money, you better run. Now, you got to understand, I was with a man that ended up putting his hands on me. And that was because I didn't know, I was contemplating which house was the lesser evil. The one I grew up in, or the guy I loved that I kind of probably gave too many chances to. And so me and him are done years before this lawsuit ended. And this lawsuit ended when I was 24. Started when I was probably 21. Yeah, when I was probably 21. And I was over it. I was over it. And basically they were saying, we can take it to court and then you have the probability of this happening and blah, 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 blah. But like I said, that voice was telling me, like, this is your chance. This is your chance. Because there was a lot more going on than just a bad relationship, bad home life, ended up at the bars, ended up with cocaine up my nose. You know what I mean? Like, I was going through a really rough time in life. Like, really, really, really rough. And so when it came to this lawsuit, it got to a point where it's like, okay, just tell the lawyers you're done and you're taking this money and you're running. Because I had heard that bird chirping in my ear for years, but before that bird was chirping in my ears about the money, I was envisioning going to these mountains for years. For years. And so the lawsuit, it ended. Prior to it ending, I called my mom's best friend and I said, she's like my second mom, and I said, can I please, stay with you until I get everything situated? Absolutely. I made sure I had a job lined up. Well, I didn't have a job lined up. I had a job interview lined up the day after I landed. But so this lawsuit happened. I got the money within like a week. I was on a one-way plane ticket out of Florida. Now, I say all this to say, when I was going through everything I was going through, and I was dating this man that I thought, I loved, and he had all the right intentions for me. Meanwhile, he did have narcissism in him. He was trying to control me. He was trying to get me to be a stay-at-home, stepmommy, and, he was trying to have one come out of me too. You know what I mean? There was like a lot of stuff going on. My home life was bad. All of these things, and then I end up in this horrible accident. That even to this day, if I don't handle myself the right way, I could still feel it. 10 years later. But this all comes back to Father God, the universe, the Most High, however which way you want to put it, working in mysterious ways. I look at him as my father. You don't have to put gender on it, but Father God, Mother Gaia. He literally utilized this relationship that did not end well. And I mean, like, being, like, he used this relationship and this man. He helped me get out of the club, even though he put his hands on me, even though he manipulated my mind and emotionally and, all the things. He used that man to pull me out of a strip club. He used that man to show me a passion like, he didn't realize like what was going on, but I learned how much I truly love dogs, animals, etc., but pit bulls especially. I was watching pit bulls and parolees as I was staying with him. That was one of my favorite shows at the time. And then lo and behold, I ended up working in my passion field. And even when I came up here, my first job was in the passion field, but it just wasn't paying my bills. So he used this man to show me how much I love animals, even though he didn't realize he was doing that at the time. This man that did put his hands on me, God used him to help with my new beginning, which is literally right in front of me right now. I used to sit on the same couch where I was pinned down with a towel over my mouth as I was, screaming for help. The same couch I used to envision being up here in the mountains is the same man who was pinning me on that couch is the same man that helped me get to these mountains. If he didn't bring me to the hospital that day, what would happen? I have no idea. All I know is I was going down a wrong path. And when I just sit back and look at it all these years later, it is absolutely incredible to me how much God had his hand in it, my Father. How much, even though it looked like the ugliest storm I was possibly going through, he might have had, my ex-boyfriend might have had the wrong intentions when it came to a lawsuit. But I was taken away from that man before that money was handed to me, years before, to where I did not associate with him like that anymore. There was a lot of things at play that lined me up to right where I'm at right now. That same man showed me what narcissism is, what helped me understand what is within my own family, how toxic love can be. Certain types of love, the toxicity that is within it, because I didn't love myself then. I didn't understand how to love myself then. I didn't have that relationship with my Father, the Most High. But that man that put his hands on me, he is a big part of what drew me closer to God. However, which way you want to address it, to my Father. That's how I look at it. Because that same man that put his hands on me, that manipulated me, that tried to control me, is the same one that brought color to my worldly father. And I didn't understand narcissism and all those things, manipulation and blah, blah, blah. I didn't understand all of that until I dated him. And then once I was able to get away from my environment, that relationship with that man, because you got to understand, I may have been 21, 20, he was 30. That relationship with that man showed me how toxic the environment that I was in, not just in his household, in my household growing up, how toxic it was. Because when you have a good, genuine heart, you genuinely want the best. You genuinely give people more chances than you should, that you love, you know, the whole spiel. And when I was so lost and confused, when I was dating him as well, there was a time frame, and that dating him was part of that time frame where I was lost and confused. Everything that happened within those years brought me to where I am right now. And if I never dated that man that put his hands on me, that hurt me in more ways than one, I would have never had just enough money to start my new beginning. Because like I said, they tried putting this lawsuit, you know, when it comes to an injury I had prior from playing ball. Supposedly it was from ball, but I mean, I believe it was. We don't know when it exactly happened. It was years of pain that I finally went to the doctor. But I had just enough money to start something. And when I mean just enough, about half that money was gone the moment I got up here and bought a car. Because the car that I had prior to leaving Florida, it was a manual, and the clutch was going out. And it was a little, you know, it was a Volkswagen Passat. And to be honest, coming from Florida, I wasn't really confident driving a stick shift up in the mountains. I mean, it was complete culture shock, moving. But that money, it gave me just enough to literally get the ball rolling. And as I sit here, and just thank God for how insane it all was and how crazy it is for me to look back on it, I can't help but thank him for putting that man in my life. And that's when, I just sit back and think that he just, he works in such mysterious ways that it's mind-blowing to me that the ugliest situation was used for so much good. Obviously, it's taken me, years to get to this point and have these understandings. And the way my mind works is I'm always trying to figure out, I believe everything happens for a reason, and I just naturally want to figure it out, learn something from it, grow from it, from all the trials and tribulations that I've been through. And it's incredible that the same man that can literally hurt you in more ways than one, is also the man that gave me a new beginning. God used him for my greater good. But had I not listened to that voice in my head saying, you better run, there's no telling what path I would be on right now. There's no telling if I would even be alive to even tell this story. Where I come from, it has changed so much over the years, and the environment I was brought up in is an environment that is not natural to me. And it was very hard for me growing up, and even though I had no idea why, and it was so hard at the time, and you had a man that would sit there and use this kid against you, use all the animals we had. What are you going to do? You're just going to leave us? And you know what I mean? The guilt trip after guilt trip after guilt trip. And I used to put so many people before me, but that voice inside of my head was leading to the first time I did something truly for myself. And that's like, I'm being serious. Like the first time I truly, authentically did not listen to anybody, because there were so many voices around me telling me how I'm supposed to live my life, what adulthood's supposed to look like, go to college, do this, do that, what are you doing with your life? And then, it was just so much. But here I am as a cold, snowy day, and when people say God works in mysterious ways, it's incredible how much he can truly work in mysterious ways if you allow him, and if you listen, and if you reach out for him. Because like I said, I didn't have a close relationship with him at the time, and that's why my life was so bad, because nobody guided me to him, nobody showed me, nobody, I didn't have a mentor, I didn't have God in my life, and I didn't have God in my heart at this time. I always had a good heart, but when you start putting so many walls around your heart, it's you can't really be love you're so guarded because of so much pain. When you're going through stuff where you can't even comprehend or understand why you're going through it until, time passes. That's what's happening to me now, It's just sitting back looking on it, looking back and just mind blown on how much God's hand was in it. And all of it was leading me closer and closer to Him because I was so lost and confused. You can take me getting on that one-way plane ticket out of Florida, guiding me right into the wilderness. It's it's one of the most beautiful things that you can experience. I never understand why people fear God. Through all of this, all these years later, the one thing I do know is co-creating with my Father. All these years has led me straight to Him. And when I got on that one-way plane ticket, you think I knew everything? You think I had it all set up at 24 years old? Heck no. I had no idea what I was about to get myself into. I went into culture shock and everything. I had to leave my dogs in Florida. The one dog wasn't even mine, technically. They were trying to put him down at the rescue I worked at, and I told him absolutely not. I needed me a guard dog, and he was exactly... That's a whole nother story within itself, because there was 2 dogs before him, and God adopted them out as the last month of me in Florida and led me right to the dog I have right now laying on my couch snoring away. But I had no idea when I landed what was in store for me. I just knew that where I was toxic. Where I came from wasn't, I didn't recognize it anymore. I didn't, the whole rat race never made sense to me, so slaving away just to survive in my hometown didn't make sense to me. I had to get away from everything and anything. And can you believe that my new beginning came from a man that put his hands on me? If I wasn't with him and he wasn't the way he was, there ain't no telling if I would have went to that hospital. When I say God is good, God is great. And that's still an understatement. It's like a magical experience that I'm living in. And I can't even say that from a physical place. Because, I can complain about, the physical things and how I wish I had it a little bit better, a better setup or whatever you want to say. But everything up to this point has been on God's hands, and these challenges, just the fact that I'm able to sit here and be in these mountains, you got to understand, coming from Florida, I never seen change of seasons. I've never seen snow. I never knew what leaves falling off of a tree look like. A whole mountain full of bare trees. I've never, until I was 24 years old. And even to this day, it still blows my mind seeing the different colors that the leaves can show. But I never would have got this experience if that man wasn't in my life. Even though it ended up going down, somewhat of a dark path, I'm grateful. He had a great family. His mother and his father were good to me. His mother would bring me shopping, you know what I mean? She was when it comes to life, it all comes down to the same thing. Are you learning from all of your experiences? Because this experience that I'm talking to you about right now was one of the most biggest living or learning curves for me. It was heartbreaking for me to leave him. I truly loved him. I still love him. I still love his son. All the animals, It was very hard. But all these years later, it's just another prime example that God can turn water to wine. And everything really does happen for a reason. It's just a matter of how you want to look at it. You can look at it through the worldly eyes, or you can look at it through the spiritual eyes. Because this journey I have been on has definitely opened up my spiritual eyes more and more and more and more and more. And which has basically made me want to sprint right into God's arms. Because my journey has been very lonely, and that's the only arms I constantly had. Besides my Lila girl, which would be my dog that passed away in April. I just wanted to tell you a story about how God works in mysterious ways. My Father, the Most High. Peace and love, y'all.